Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Well, hey, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky. And we are back this week for what is quickly closing into G.I. Joe number 155 with another episode of Joe and Joe Illustrated. Today we're talking about G.I. Joe number 147. So the clock is counting down. I'm getting more excited. I know in the real world, in our current continuity, we're weeks away from G.I. Joe 300. Cannot wait to read that. Actually, I forgot. I meant to catch. I haven't read 298 and 99 yet, so I need to catch up on that. Spoiler alert. I think one of our faves comes back. I know it's been out for like 2 weeks, but I've been busy. Been running around, going to sweet weddings. And we've also been busy prepping for the next iteration of the show. Now, for you new listeners, this is Joe on Joe, the podcast where we go over every issue of G.I. Joe Real American Hero in sequential order, page by page, panel by panel. We've covered all of the cartoons, episode by episode, from Sunbow all the way to the DIC. Pretty much everything should be available on the various feeds. You can find me certainly at Apple, like at iTunes and any of your podcast catchers. You can also go to our Patreon, patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod. And we have pretty much everything available there as well. If you want to be a patron, you can help support the show, and you get access to about 50 or so extra episodes that I've recorded over the years of illustrated issues to cover some of the first 50 issues of G.I. Joe. And while you're on the internet, you follow me at Joe on Joe Pod. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And you can send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. So what I've been prepping for is this next iteration of the show, which is going to be called You on Joe. The show will still be Joe and Joe because, branding. But we're going to be focusing on you and your favorite aspect of G.I. Joe. So I've already got like 8 people have reached out, 8 or 9. So that's really great. And they're filling in, the slots are filling in. They're picking topics. We're going to start recording, hopefully, probably by, maybe mid-November, early December. And then the show will be going, I guess, let's see, based on this, the show will be transferring in about 9 weeks. So I better hurry up, is what I'm saying. But it's great. We got great topics so far. People have chosen things like Sergeant Slaughter. Someone chose, I'll keep it spoiler of what they are, but someone chose one of the battle play sets. Someone chose a relationship to talk about. Someone chose a specific episode of the show, of the cartoon we're going to talk about in depth. What else? Let me reference it real quick. I'm not going to spoil it. Yeah, a specific comic book has been chosen, like an actual issue. There's been a one specific figure chosen. So you know what I'm saying? Like people are grabbing slots. So they're grabbing their topic, and that's right. I said Sergeant Slaughter because I think he might kick off the show because I've never really covered him in depth. And friend of the show, Joey Kochik, former guest, owner of Crypto, he reached out. So there's your spoiler. Joey. If you hear this, you're probably going to be my first guest, and we're going to do it in depth on the Sarge. That's going to be exciting. Also, while we're talking about internet, so real quick. So if you want to be a guest on that, if you want to partake in You on Joe, I need you to send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Just put You on Joe in the title and, reach out and let me know. Or let me know through, or reach out through any of the Instagrams and all that stuff. Just ping me and let me know, and I'll reserve your spot and I'll reserve your topic, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm really excited to start that. It's one of those things where it's going to be last minute. Every week I go, oh man, I got to start recording those so I can get ahead of the game, and so I'm not super rushed. Yeah, you know me and planning. But while we're on the topic of all this stuff, I want to send a huge shout out. Literally minutes before I went on the air, I got a little swag bag from our friends at the Nighttime Podcast, Jordan Bonaparte and his great son, Dom. I was recently a guest on their YouTube channel show for their podcast. So first of all, everyone go to Nighttime Podcast. It's about like spooky going-ons and crime stuff happening up in Canada, which, you know, all the weird stuff happens in Canada. And Jordan reached out. He got a collection, a G.I. Joe collection in a sale or something, like state sale, I forget. And he reached out. He's a listener, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come on my show and help me identify them?" So we did that. So I shared that link on Twitter, and it's on his YouTube page. And the three of us, he and his son and myself, we went through and we identified some Joes for him. And it was a whole lot of fun, and they were listeners, and so they sent me a little swag bag, and I just want to reach out and thank you if you guys are hearing this. You're awesome. Everyone listen, subscribe to their podcast, check it out. It's great. It's so thank you so much. And of course, we're going to get Jordan on Joe. I also want to send a big shout out to a friend of the show. You hear me talk about him a lot, Paul Galliano. Paul, who is an actor, and he's super talented. And he's a super great guy and a good friend of the show and really good friend of mine. He has this great show called Tea with Paul G, TEA with Paul G. Just find him on YouTube. Just throw that in the YouTube search bar. And it's Paul sitting down kind of a little, like across the aisle with a cup of tea and with some actor / Hollywood guests, and they talk about the business. They talk about how they broke in. They literally talk about tea, like TEA, like they get into what kind of tea they're drinking, what they're enjoying. And Paul's a Southerner. Now, Paul also voices Copperhead in Cold Slither, and he's done. He was one of the Zaymot twins. I forget, he was Tomax's Zaymot, one of the Paoli twins. And he's a really great actor, but he's just as a host on this show of his, he's just charming and kind, and his show is all about positivity. They focus on that on the show and positive stuff. So it's a real like brighten your day kind of show. I believe they're doing about 6 episodes this season. Please give him some support. So go to YouTube, type in TEA with Paul G, and you're going to enjoy it. He had pardon me for forgetting their names, but he had the stunt double for Darth Vader, the guy who literally plays Darth Vader now in Star Wars. He was great. He was awesome. A lot of insight if you're a Star Wars fan. And then they had the voice actor he's not just voice actor, but he does the voice for Mr. Negative in the Spider-Man games. If you played Spider-Man on PS4 and PS5, the villain, Mr. Negative, this was the guy who did the voice actor. He also had Young Girl from I guess there's a basketball show with John Stamos, and she was it's great. It's a great show. Really enjoyed it. So please go support our friend Paul. Paul's a huge G.I. Joe fan. He loves Cobra Commander. He's done a lot of Cobra Commander cosplay in the past. So let's do everything we can to roll out and get him some views and support his show. And while we're talking promos and support, we cannot not mention our awesome podcast, guys. So our sponsor, the Movies in a Meal podcast, they have been a great sponsor of the show for going on 2 years, I think. Awesome. They make this. They keep the lights on here. They help the show go. It's really great. They just put out an episode talking about the new movies Till, about Emmett Till. And Tar is with, what's her name? She plays the Ancient One in the Marvel movies, and she's amazing. Tilda Swinton, right? I think Tilda Swinton's in it. Is it Tilda Swinton or who's in Tar? It's about it's what's her name who played Hela, right? In something, one of those Marvel movies, and it's supposedly really good. I haven't seen it, so I don't know what it's about, but something like she's a orchestra player, and then she's an assassin, or she murders. I don't know. Some craziness goes on. That's what I get from the trailer for Tar, that it gets out of control, and I don't know what happens. But that's what they're talking about this week. And they're also talking about some TV stuff. They did some episodes on The White Lotus. They did some She-Hulk episodes as well. I enjoyed She-Hulk quite a bit. I thought it was really good. I do think that I'll say this about She-Hulk. Disney, you're Disney. Spend the money. Work on the CGI. Let's just do that. Don't make a joke about how CGI is expensive. You're still, at the end of the day, you're still Disney. You have every dollar in the world. So the last people I want to see make a joke about expensive CGI and then also have bad CGI is Disney. But having said that, Tatiana Maslany is great on the show. I loved it. I love the fourth wall breaking and everything. So I look forward to more seasons of that. Although whoever designed Scar, Son of Hulk, that whoever literally designed, like whoever made the choice to say, yeah, let's go with that design. Like whoever made that choice, not the designer, because like you design stuff, come up with a whole lot of ideas. Like this would work, and then here's 5 different takes on a thing, and you know that there's some better than others. So I'm not actually faulting the designer. I'm faulting the guy who chose that design. That Scar is terrible. One of the worst looking. The way I envisioned Scar coming to life on a Hulk Marvel show, that literally is the worst possible way I could possibly envision Scar looking, especially his quote introduction to the Marvel universe. The fact that that got zero buzz and only got people going, what the F? And that when they introduced Scar, Son of Hulk, which means Planet Hulk is coming and all that stuff, wow, that was a bad look. So it's not the designer, because like I said, we all put out like iterations of things, and some aren't better than others. It's the person that chose it. Whoever chose it, terrible taste. Anywho, they talk about She-Hulk over at Movies and a Meal. So subscribe to Movies and a Meal podcast. Please, please, please do give them a listen. All right. I think that's it. That's our plugs out the way. Plugs and thank yous and kudos and all that stuff. But so now we're going to get some nitty gritty G.I. Joe stuff. First of all, guys, guess what came in the mail yesterday or today? My ARAH, my Transformers ARAH, hot on the heels of the transforming Hiss tank last week. I haven't even had a chance to open the Hiss tank, and now I've got an ARAH. I ordered all of these so long ago I forgot they existed. I was literally in a text chain with some friends, talking G.I. Joe, talking Transformers. Friend of the show, Matt Kyle, and it was Matt. It's with Matt and Kevin, who we did the Viper episode with. Yeah, and they're both big G.I. Joe, big Transformers fans. And in the chat, I was saying, man, they should do Bumblebee as an ARAH. And it's like they did. They did, and you probably bought one. And I went, oh yeah, I did reorder one. And then it showed up this week. So that's exciting. Can't wait to open that. I think our Funko stuff from GameStop shipped. Those Funko like surprise boxes. I hope it has something I don't normally have, because I think I've got most all the Funkos. I finally put those out at my house. Those are on display. I'm excited about that. Yeah, I think that's it. I did see some Tomax and Zaymont on the shelves at Target, which is great to see. So, keep building the brand bit by bit, measure by measure, and we will all rise with it. So now,
you were saying?
That's right, Stalker. We're going to look at comic books that were on the shelf the same month as the issue in question, which is G.I. Joe number 147. Cover dated April 1994. Actual calendar date would have been February of 1994. But also cover date of April 1994 is Amazing Spider-Man 388. This was a big deal. Spider-Man's parents are dead. They were dead. Then they've been running the story where they thought they were alive, and then now they die again. So it turns out, I believe they were clones, but it had something to do with Chameleon and some plot to convince Peter that, something or other with his parents. But it was neat because, in 380 some issues, well, more than that, if you include Spectacular and Web of, you're talking about 500 to 600 issues of Spider-Man. They never dealt with his parents. They really never did. It was always an afterthought. It was always the peril was to Aunt May and any real parenting stuff. I mean, they would reference his parents and occasionally do it, but Ben and Mary Parker were never really given much heft, even like Superman. Yeah, you had the Kents, but they would do flashback stories and show him with, like life on Krypton with Jor-El and Lara, what would that be like? And, in Batman, they had fleshed out, like kind of what his parents were. But Peter's parents were really always kind of a mystery. So this story was fun. And I remember it was pretty popular at the time because people really thought they were going to be around. And they had filled in, some gaps over the years of like that they were spies and that they died on a plane, like they told like those stories, like so that they didn't just die, they died, they were smuggling a plane, but this was bringing them back to life and having Peter interact with them, which was pretty neat. And of course, Parker Luck, it was all a plot to to get something, I forget what it was, but it was all a plot orchestrated by the Chameleon, if memory serves. So they're dead on the cover, and spoiler alert, dead inside as well, not unlike all of us. Daredevil 327. It's continuing that the big Scott McDaniel arc. The full arc name is escaping my head, but the reason I mentioned this actually is the cover is gorgeous. It's a stone white cover. It's a stone white background cover, pardon me, with Captain America's shield and the new look Daredevil. He's got that new look, black and red, kind of armor going on. He's kind of leaping off front, but he's in front of Captain America's shield, and the shield is like fading off into white on it. It's just a stark, good looking cover. I've always enjoyed this cover. This is a neat cover. It's got the new Daredevil trade dress too, which I would love this cover with like the traditional trade dress because I don't know, like the Daredevil. But it's funny, Daredevil when you have. So this cover kind of gives him horns, or the trade dress kind of puts horns on it, but it also points out that Daredevil also can be dared evil, which I'm not the first one to point that out. I forget who it was, a creator who I read for. That's how they always looked at it. But it really kind of stands out in this cover too. So that's a good cover. It's a good looking cover. Excalibur 76 is out. It's got Nightcrawler on it. I love Nightcrawler. The reason I bring this up is because I'm going to be soon recording a podcast with our friends over at Cyclops is Waiting For Me, the podcast. So look for that. And we're covering the issue of X-Men, the animated series, the episode of Nightcrawler. Because he is absolutely one of my favorite X-Men, probably top 3. And I love him. And he was the reason why I stuck with Excalibur. He's the reason I went to Excalibur in the first place with issue 1, because I wanted to follow his exploits because I really liked him. And I always enjoyed Excalibur more when he took front and center. And this is a series that it doesn't call to me to reread it, but I have just such fond memories of it. And I remember even through some tough times, I remember sticking through it. So I think maybe I need to do an Excalibur reread at some point. And, because I don't have other stuff it's piling up to read. But I feel like I need to revisit Excalibur. And not just the early issues, like the really sweet Alan Davis ones, but like this mid-range stuff. Because there was some cool stuff. And I know Warren Ellis did a big run on Excalibur. I forget exactly what he did during it, but I remember it being really good. And it was just kind of like... he was older, but I think he was still kind of new to the Marvel universe at the time. And so it was, it was a good run. What else do we got here? Hulk and Pantheon. Oh, this is Incredible Hulk versus Venom #1. This is another one of those comic books that if you ever see it, just back of your head, Incredible Hulk versus Venom, grab it, because it is a one-shot special, and it is not cheap. Not that it's super expensive, but it's not a throwaway $3 book, because not a lot of people know about it, and it's got Venom on it. It's a one shot, and I think it's got something to do with a trial or a jury or something. I do believe Peter David wrote it. Yeah, Peter David wrote it. Jim Craig penciled it. Oh no, the other no, not trial. This is something else. That was one of the other random Venom one shots. But this is a comic book not a lot of people know about, is what I'm saying. So if you ever see it, if you ever come across it and it's cheap in a dollar bin, grab it. Or cheap in a cheap bin, grab it, because it's decent. It's Peter David writing Hulk, which means it's good. But it's also, it's got some aftermarket value. Marvel's wraps up with issue number 4. Oh, that's right. It ends with the death of Gwen Stacy. That was the big arc. And a lot of angst, a lot of books like Secret Defenders. The Scarlet Witch is issue 4 of her miniseries. Sabretooth Classic. A lot of people, 4 Punisher issues this month. All that good stuff. There's just a lot of angst and a lot of covers. Oh, War Machine #1 hit the stand. So they gave James Rhodes his first series, and the first issue of that is out there. So that's pretty neat. And yeah. Oh, and an early trade for Marvel, the Executioner song trade paperback hit the stands.
You were saying?
Now, over at DC Comic Books, not a lot jumps out at me as being... Oh, here we go. Guy Gardner Warrior, a couple episodes back, I talked about how they were changing his power, taking away his ring because Hal destroyed all the rings and all that stuff. And he's in full Voldarian mode here. He's got this iron suit on. So Guy Gardner's making that transition after the effects of Green Lantern. Legends of the World's Finest, it's issue number 3. It's actually the final issue of it. I don't think I've talked about this book before. It's by Dan Brereton, who is a really talented still creator, and all of his characters always have this 5 o'clock shadow. It's like almost like even the women almost have it. And there's a look to his stuff that is instantly appealing. And then when I read it, I enjoy it, but it all blends in together. Like I feel like there's and I don't mean that to take anything away from him. I don't mean that. I'm saying his style is so kind of quasi unique, but it's suited for big frames. And whenever I've read his stuff in sequential, it's always left me a little cold. But I love his there's Gunwitch. He also did Thrill Killer. And I love his style when I first see it and I see the covers and all that stuff, but it always leaves me a little cold on interiors. So I don't mean that as a slam. If Dan Brereton, if you're a big G.I. Joe fan, you're out there listening. I really do like your stuff. There's just something about it when it goes sequential for this stuff that leaves me a little cold. Superman Doomsday, Hunter Prey. I don't remember this being out so quickly. That's wild. So we are just hot on the heels of the death of Superman, right? Superboy only in issue 3 of his own series. Superman died in issue 75, and we're only on issue number 88. So this is just 8 months after he died. And they've already come out with the sequel to Superman Doomsday. And it's by Dan Jurgens and this kind of the same creative team. And this was a 3-issue mini, and they kind of dealt with the aftermath of Doomsday, because Doomsday, the whole premise was he comes back. Well, actually, I'm sorry, we didn't know that. They explain it in this. They explain because he was put on his body was put on a rock, I believe, and sent into space. And this explained, I believe this story is the one that actually gave his origins, where it was, he was a science experiment that was thrown out on the surface of prehistoric Krypton by scientists, and he would get killed by either the atmosphere or creatures. They would scoop up the remains of his body, clone that, clone it in a day, accelerate it, throw it back out the next day. It would last for like a second longer than it did the day before. They would do the same, rinse and repeat, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of times. So like they forced evolution on this same batch of cells, so that eventually he would survive, in the atmosphere for a minute, right? And he would be able to take on one type of danger, and then his body would build defenses. So it's literally like forcing evolution. And so that's eventually how you get this unkillable, unstoppable machine, because he's faced everything. So the gag is, now that he's been killed by Superman, he shouldn't be able to be killed by Superman again. And this miniseries, if memory serves, this is a miniseries where they lay all that out. I enjoyed it. Valor 18 is doing a Crisis on Infinite Earths homage. It's also it's the DOA series. So I like Valor as a comic book because I love Legion, and this dealt with the fact that the Valor was different from Largand from the future. So there was a time doppelganger that came back, and I believe what happened is the Valor of the 20th century, who was like a time who was supposed to be the Valor of the future, actually died. So the Valor of the future, who had already lived through 1,000 years in either, call it what you want, the Big Zittil buffer zone or the negative zone or whatever, whatever du jour DC is calling it these days. He lived 1,000 years in limbo, and then was Brainiac 5 Freedom when he cured his lead poisoning. The Valor of the future had to come back and relive the Valor of the current day's existence. Otherwise, time would break. So when current Largand dies, time is starting to crumble, and that's where Glorith gets involved. So Valor, who has already lived through 1,000 years of limbo, has to come back and live through another 1,000 years of limbo. And he has to redo all of his deeds, like seed all the worlds that, get seeded by, his exploits throughout the galaxy and all that stuff. So he essentially has to relive his life in order to prevent time and all that stuff from breaking down. It's a great hook and a great tragic story. It's written by Mark Waid. It's really, really good and tragic, because then this dude is agreeing to go live for another 1,000 years in the Phantom Zone, or the Big Zittil buffer zone, whatever they're calling it. It's cool. So yeah, if you've never read Valor, probably a lot of you have not read Valor. It really ties in heavily with Legion of Superheroes at the time, but it's ultimately pretty good series. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Yeah, I think we're good.
Now, mass is ready.
Oh, but wait, hold on. I forgot.
You were saying?
Movies. February 1994. There's a lot of movies came out in February 1994, and not all of them good. The biggest one, definitely the biggest one, is on February 4th, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. So while G.I. Joe 147 was on the stands, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective was in the movie theaters. Listen, say what you will about this movie. I know a lot of you love it. I do not love the Ace Ventura. I don't like Jim Carrey in this zone. I don't like Jim Carrey doing the whole Dumb and Dumber, like him doing that shtick. Not a fan. I wasn't a fan then. I'm not a fan now. I like him in stuff like Cable Guy and The Truman Show. I thought he was really good. And that dark comedy he did on Showtime for a couple of years, really good. But like this shtickle, like talk through your butt stuff, never was a fan. But recognize that this was a huge hit for sure. So Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, February 4th. There's also a movie, My Father the Hero. This is part of the we need to make Gerard Depardieu a star in America cycle of films, and where Gerard Depardieu is father to Katherine Heigl, and I believe he's like trying to keep her from making romantic mistakes, and it didn't work. Let's put it this way: he never became a leading guy in America. I think there was a reason. We also get the movie Romeo is Bleeding with Gary Oldman, Lena Olin. This is a movie I haven't seen or thought about in 30 years. I would revisit this movie just because it's got Roy Scheider, Gary Oldman. I mean, this Annabella Sciorra, Lena Olin, Juliette Lewis. I might need to revisit this movie. I do not remember if I liked it or not, but I remember it. I absolutely remember it. February 11th, the movie Blank Check is out. One of the greatest anime drawings. We used to do fun drawings for comic boxes at Golden Apple, and our friend Jordan drew Wolverine looking over his shoulder with the blank check cover for the X-Men box, and that cracked us up to absolutely no end. We also have The Getaway, and that's Alec Baldwin, Kim Basinger. And then My Girl 2, because My Girl, the kid getting stung by bees to death wasn't enough. We have time for another victim. February 18th, how do you like my spin move, coach? Blue Chips, starring Shaquille O'Neal, who's not terrible in this movie. Say what you will. He's also not terrible in Steel. Steel is terrible, but he is not terrible in it. Like, they had they given him somewhat of a budget for an actual suit of armor in Steel, you might have had a movie. Also on the 18th, On Deadly Ground with garbage Steven Seagal, but continuing his 3-word titles. This is the one where he goes to Alaska, right? And he fights pipeline people. Reality Bites, which is a huge Gen X movie. One that I think I can say I've never seen, because I would have avoided it at the time. I would have been like, it's too on the nose. But yeah, that was a huge movie for my gen at the time. On the 25th, you got 8 Seconds, which is that cowboy movie starring Luke Perry, Stephen Baldwin. I promise you I've never seen this one either. You've also got Sugar Hill with Wesley Snipes, Blade himself. That's awesome. Speaking of Blade, I think I tweeted this out. Apparently Marvel lost the director for Blade, and so they're kind of shelving the movie for now, which is a shame. You all need to give Reggie Hudlin a look. Heads up, Reggie Hudlin. I don't know if he'd be interested, but I would love to see. Reggie Hudlin knows comic books back and forth. I would love to see his take on a Marvel property, and Blade sounds like a great match for Reggie. I think he'd be awesome in it. They also re-released Midnight Cowboy, which is a great movie, John Schlesinger film. Dustin Hoffman, John Voight, and that's a wonderful movie. So there's a lot of like mid-level movies. Just there's a lot of those movies this month.
Now, mass is ready.
All right, now with Destro, it's time. G.I. Joe 147 featuring the Star Brigade. I like this cover. You got a bunch of these robots. These Russian-built, hijacked robots that are going to send an asteroid hurtling towards Earth. I do want to shout out friend Dave Amiot, who pointed out, I know I made it on Twitter, an Armageddon inference. I think I did it actually on the podcast too. I forgot. I didn't realize Armageddon came out 4 years after this. Armageddon was 98. This predated Armageddon, and it is the exact same plot as Armageddon. Well, not exact same. There's no oil drillers and roughnecks, as they like to call themselves in Armageddon. But it's the same plot, pretty much. So, kudos to G.I. Joe for being ahead of the curve. Maybe Armageddon stole it from G.I. Joe. That's what I'm here to talk about. But it says, it's mayhem on the moon as the Joes ride the Oblivion Express. That's a fun teaser. I think that's a whole lot of fun. And frankly, I think it's necessary because you don't necessarily know. Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Time out. They're not on the moon. All right. Rewind. Problem with that. They're not on the moon. I get it, though. You're not going to say it's mayhem on an asteroid that's hurtling towards Earth. So, okay. But it's definitely wrong because they're not on the moon. They're on an asteroid. However, I do love the blurb teasing people what's going on inside, and it's called the Oblivion Express. Peek real quick. Is that what they actually called the name of the... Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, that's what the name of the story is called. So that's cool. I like that part. And you really can't tell from the cover that they're in space. Yes, they have the pressure suits on, but that could be anything. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually in space. So referencing that on the cover, I think works and helps. Yeah, and then it's just, it's fun. It's I think it's Duke, and is it not Horror Show, but whoever the head of the October Guard, Schrag. I always get my October Guards mixed up. Red Star. It's probably Red Star. Yeah, so it's Red Star, and I think probably Duke, back to back fighting with some of these autonomous robots, which this idea of like these robots gone wild, that's kind of a lot. It really is a lot like what Larry's doing in the more modern G.I. Joe stuff too. So this, I wonder if this is a, and it's not like these robots were part of the toy line. So that's something that came from Larry. Like that's Larry wanting to explore that. So I wonder if he's ever talked about that. Like if he has these like overarching fears about, not, robots rising up and taking over, but you know what I mean, like automation and robots taking over like labor and things like that. I wonder if that's a concern of his. I wonder if he's ever spoken about that. I don't know off the top of my head that I know that he has.
Yo, Joe!
So the inside blurb is correct. On an asteroid hurtling on a collision course with Earth. That is accurate. They are not, in fact, on the moon, but it is Duke. And he is shooting a robot in the face. I like this. It's a big splash page. I like it. It gets the point across. You definitely know you're in space, even without the caption. You know you're in space just based on that. Like they give you the background, and I like the detail. There is well, we'll get to the next page, but yeah.
Yo, Joe!
Nice 2-page spread. Earlier last week we talked about they introduced the robot, like the armor bots, which is part of the Star Brigade stuff. They actually use that in the comic book, which is really cool. They look like robotics to me, but they do use them. And they're in a space crater. You could see the Earth in the background. The title's called Oblivion Express. Nice placement. I also like that they put the moon in the picture to remind you that you're not actually on the moon, that they're on an asteroid. That's really smart. It's a nice 2-page spread with Roadblock in his bot fighting. There's a October Guard version of the bot. They're fighting these robots. It's nicely rendered, nice inks and stuff, and this is what I bring it to. It's a G.I. Jam, script by Larry Hama, breakdowns by Phil Gossier. That's important. Breakdowns. Finishes. Crusher Wallace, Steve Alexandrov, Jim Amash, and Don Hudson. Coloring Bob Sharon, lettering Vicki Williams, editor Mike Lackey, and editor-in-chief Dom DeFalco. So, I'm not going to say I can tell whose inks were on what pages, but you can absolutely tell there's a definite, it's a wobble in quality from page to page as far as the inks go. And you could see probably on some pages more than others, the breakdowns and layouts were probably a little more in-depth. For example, these first 3 pages really look great. There's lots of line work, lots of heavy blacks, spotted in all the right places. Like it's sharp. Everything looks sharp. Things look pretty crisp, and so on. As we get further into the book, some of that disappears, and it's a little jarring. Not enough to indict it, so to speak, but it's definitely noticeable. And again, maybe they were up against the dreaded deadline doom. So this is we're going to be on page 1, 2, 3. We're going to be on page 4.
Yo, Joe!
We see one of these robots getting hurtled into space, and they're actually being picked off because they were on top of Roadblock's combat drone, robotics looking thing. Picked off at Sci-Fi and Dinah from the October Guard, and she made that shot. And he says, I like this. So his Sci-Fi gives her a heads up. She says, but we are just doing our jobs as designated laser snipers. We need more targets. So it's great. Even in just the dialogue, Larry drives home the differences in culture of, Sci-Fi's more, congrats, you did a great thing. And she's more, no, I'm just doing it for the state. I'm doing it for my team. I'm doing it for, I'm just part of a team, blah, blah, blah. So it takes a quick piece of dialogue. She could have said, thanks. Hey, we need to shoot more targets. Like she could have said something as simple as that, but it's a character moment. And I really appreciate that. Now they get snuck up on by some bots, and this drawing of Roadblock in his suit, his spacesuit, pardon me, his Star Brigade suit. I will give the Star Brigade the credit they deserve. In his Star Brigade suit, I love it. I love the embellishment on this page. It's great, especially the what would you call it? Like the explosion or the effects that come out of the gun. I don't know, what do you call that? Because you see it in every comic book when they shoot a gun, you draw the. It's like the compression that blasts out of a gun. You know what I'm talking about. I don't even know if we've ever really coined a word for that. But in this page, it looks great. It's kind of got this charcoaly dissolve going on, and it's because the dark of space is kind of, you see that through this flash of light, and I don't know if that was their intent, but they did a great job with it. It really stands out. I think it looks really good. You get a similar thing on the next page as well, but I dig it. So Roadblock shows up and kind of saves their bacon a little bit.
Yo, Joe!
And meanwhile, the droids are cleaning up the rest of the robots. And there's more of that dissolve in the backsplash of the cannons firing. This is Red Star getting most of these things. Now, Red Star says they have to chase these robots down and eliminate them to the last microchip. But Duke thinks that we got to get to the mission, because remember, they're on the mission. They're there to divert the asteroid. They're not necessarily there to attack the robots. The robots are the ones that are hurtling the rock to the Earth. So all they have to do is shift the orbit of the asteroid, very much like Armageddon. And then their job is technically done. They don't have to chase all these robots down. But Red Star's making the argument that there's no way they're going to succeed with all these drones harassing us. So we have to go get them first before we can fix it. So he calls off the October Guard, and they go off towards the robots.
Yo, Joe!
Remember last time they kind of split teams up. They put one Joe with the October Guard and one October Guard with the Joes. So that apparently that split up is now broken. And exactly that, someone calls it a cluster F. What do they call it? It's actually, this is turning into a Class A cluster foul up. That's so funny, because it would have been they're using 5 words to say what normal soldiers would say in 2 words, if you know what I'm saying. And dividing our forces into unknown hostile territory is like playing with Willie Pete, white phosphorus, on a gas blivet. I don't know what a blivet is, but we're going to find out. So Roadblock suggests staying with the Russians, just because they should stay with them. Now, this page is, I like the layout. We've got the two... We got the, actually, it's not, yeah. See, I thought it was Roadblock in the drive. Whoever's driving, I forget who's driving. Maybe it's a Payload. It's driving the Joe robot, and there's the Dragonsky is in the October Guard robot. This is the first panel that I thought, I looked at it, and the inks looked a little rushed. Like, they looked a little light for me here. But I was like, all right, I'll go with it. And so then they decide to... what do we say here? They're going off on the guys on their feet are going off on search and destroy. You and Dragonsky are going to be all alone with their shuttles. So basically, the giant robots are going to protect the shuttles because that's their only way home. Meanwhile, the gang on foot is going to go with the Russians.
Yo, Joe!
Now, meanwhile, in Darklonia, if you remember, Zartan and Destro were kind of brainwashed by Cobra Commander removing his face based on a post-hypnotic suggestion that Dr. Mindbender had implanted years earlier. And they blew up Darklon's castle. And in this issue, there's, as far as we know, Darklon's dead. I don't know if he is full-time. Don't spoil it for me. But so Zartan and Destro are invading Darklonia right now. And they're chasing everybody. Now, we have a couple Joes that are in mufti. They're in disguise. And they see what's going on. And it is, who is it? It's Stalker and Hawk. This bottom panel, I don't love. I don't love the inks. It looks very rushed. Everything on it looks rushed. Everything looks amateur. It looks, I've talked about this before, a long time ago. There's a look to indie comics by artists it's an almost universal vibe. It's hard to describe, and it's like a speed bump that artists have to get over. I don't think I've ever gotten over it in my drawings, but when they do get over it, their art pops and their art just has more life to it. But there's a look to it, to indie books, that I know it when I see it, but I kind of have a hard time describing it. And I'm seeing it a lot in this issue. And that tells me that it's just not rushed. It's just not finished. It's just not polished. This panel is the first real example of that. There's another panel on the next page, similar example. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the third panel on this page was inked by someone differently than the second panel was inked by someone differently than the third panel, because the inks on the second panel look sharp and look decisive and look good, and it's just not there in this third panel.
Yo, Joe!
And again, I don't mean to rain on anyone's parade on a 30-year-old comic book. I'm sure there were deadlines, and I'm sure people did their best and rushed, and all that stuff. I'm just calling it like I see it. So now and it turns out these two observers, it was Hawk and it was Stalker. So they need to get back to the Joes and kind of report on it. So this is a funny bit of story. They roll into a, I don't exactly know what, the story doesn't really tell us where it is. They just run, it's a family having dinner. And I don't know what Hawk thinks he's saying, but it's a fun gag because the dad says, "Why did he want to know how to get to the secret stuffed cabbage?" And that's really funny because then Stalker's like, "I didn't know you could spricken see Darklonian," so that's fun. But I don't know. Are they just running through someone's house? Or, is it like a Ferris Bueller moment when he's cutting through backyards? I think that's what they're going for, a Ferris Bueller moment of running through the backyards and like, "Hey girls," that kind of a thing. But the father in this drawing and Hawk in the second drawing, both those images are very much what I'm talking about as far as indie stuff goes. There's just this lack of polish to it. There's this, like, things are floating. They just don't seem tight. Nothing on their faces seem connected. Every proportions are off. Like it's rough, and that this feels like it was very much a sketch thing. But then you get to the bottom of this page, and this drawing of Zartan and Destro are sharp, and like the inks are strong. Lots of definition, like on Zartan's arms and the musculature and stuff. So it feels like this page was half inked by two different people. So, which is weird, because usually, this is me guessing, but typically it's like, here's a whole page, please ink it. This really feels like the Destro stuff with Zartan was inked completely differently, separately from the same stuff on the same page with Hawk.
Yo, Joe!
So now, in Volkuku land, I always mispronounce that, the guy, the general leader Krantz, he sees that Cobra is attacking. Destro and Zartan are attacking, and but he thinks they're attacking. It's actually one little vehicle. It's Duke and Stalker, but he fires on them anyway. Duke. I keep saying Duke. It's Hawk and Stalker, but he fires on them anyway, and they're not very happy, obviously. So he yells ceasefire. This page also has it's got a lightness to it, and there's not a lot of it's not bad, and it's got its own style to it, but it's like there's more of a tracing feel on the inks on this page, like it's more of like, let's make sure we get the forms in, and then we'll move on. But so they fire on Hawk and Stalker.
Yo, Joe!
Who aren't very happy when they roll up. They said, Hawk says, "If you want to stop Destro and Zartan and the whole Cobra Legion, you'd better improve your marksmanship," because they missed him, obviously. And then leader Krantz gets all pissed off, and they eventually come to a thing where basically says, Stalker says, "Advisors don't hang out at the sites of pitched battles, and especially is what apparently going to be a losing one. And so Leader Krantz asked them for some advice. And Hawk says, dig those tanks into hull down positions and move up all your reserves. Then we need telephone poles, fuel drums, and cargo containers. What could Hawk be up to? What he's up to is pretty cool, but I had no idea what he was doing with those.
Yo, Joe!
It's a real A-team moment. So now we're back on this asteroid hurtling towards space. It kind of looks like a giant potato in this first picture. Not hurtling towards space, hurtling in space towards planet Earth. Space Shot is he's piloting the armor bot. And it's just, they're fighting more robots. It's interesting. So a page like this doesn't give us much, right? Like it just kind of resets that they're on the asteroid. And then there's roadblocks saying, ask and bring up the armor. And then there's a big panel of the robot shooting these droids. It's weird. It's like they're trying for like a panel progression, because there's panels on top of panels, but it's all supposed to be set over the backdrop of space. And I get where they're going with this, and I actually like where they're going with this, but I feel like it should have been bigger. So if you're looking at this page, picture like the background would be all space with a little asteroid at the top. Then inset into that is another panel. And in that panel is it's a bunch of droids fighting the Joes, shooting at things. And then overlaying that and cropping out a bunch of that even closer to the camera is another shot of the armor bot shooting at these droids and kind of taking them out of the picture. So it's like this as we zoom in, the panels come to us as well. And I like that. There's just something about it that's not popping for me. And I don't know what it is. I think, is it that space needs to be the same black in each panel, which would make it harder to discern? I get that. Is it that, so there's one Joe whose right arm is barely breaking the panel on the like the gutter on the left side, but that's the page gutter. If the Joe was breaking the gutter over the asteroid picture, and this is much easier if you guys are watching this or reading along, so I apologize if you can't follow. I'm doing my best. But if they popped over the back panel and then this front panel popped over all of that, maybe even with no panel, that would be a thing. I don't know. There's just something about this that's a little off to me, but I like what they're doing.
Yo, Joe!
So they won the battle here against all these robots, and they're surprised that this is all they are, because they said, there were a whole bunch more before. And they'd say, look at those tracks. They're circling around and back towards where they came from. So they're, going for an ambush. They're going after their space shuttles. This was a diversion. Their real objective is they're going to destroy the space shuttles. They're their only means of getting back to Earth. So we've got all these, so now we do have all these robots attacking the space shuttle. I can't let these deranged androids compromise our hull integrities.
Yo, Joe!
Because, really, the question is, who had two Defiants? I get it. Some of you had one Defiant. Who had two Defiants? Joe's don't even have two Defiants. How are they going to send another Defiant up there? So Payload and Dragonsky are in the shuttle, kind of holding down the fort. But they're targeting these androids, but they're really not going to make it. This picture of Dragonsky is underdeveloped, to say the least. It's rough. It's real rough. I don't mind the rest of the panel, the second panel. I don't mind the rest of it, but his face is real hard. But I like the layout choice though, because when we get to the Defiant is actually losing this battle, and so Payload is escaping, and they put Payload in this like heavy shadow as they break through the windshield of it. For me, it's implying that like all the power is going out because they're attacking it. So he's dropping in shadows. He's fleeing the Defiant. I like that.
Yo, Joe!
So yeah, so he gets out the back, and he shows up in the, is this the Stellar Stiletto? What is this? I guess just the Starfighter. That was, I never had this one, but yeah, the G.I. Joe Starfighter. And that's apparently Payload's keeping that one in reserve, so he launches himself out the back of that. That's exciting. Don't get too attached to it though.
Yo, Joe!
Because it don't stick around long. Back in Darklonia, we see that Destro and Cobra Commander are hatching some plans. And like a football game, Destro basically says, Cobra Commander, you roll up the middle. Zartan and I will go around the sides. We'll do all the hard work. And then you just kind of roll in. And, Cobra Commander demands to be the one to do the fighting. Because he thinks he's being treated just as a diversion. So then Destro's like, very well, I'll take the middle, and you can command the right wing. I'm reading this page as Destro is happy to be in the middle because he knows that whether there's actual fighting or not, the guy in the middle is going to have the glory because he's going to roll through the center and it's going to look like he's defeated everyone. So regardless of what actually happens in the next few pages, I took this as another Cobra Commander shooting himself in the foot again. Of Destro being like, okay, if you don't want to take the glory here, go for it. But before they do, they have a bunch of detonator missiles to fire, which they do amply.
Yo, Joe!
Now back in space, Dragonsky is now it's his turn in the to get attacked, and the robots have broken through the Russian space shuttle. They've broken through to his cockpit, but now here comes the Starfighter, and within the span of, so it launched panel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels later, the Starfighter has been knocked out of the sky. So that's it for the G.I. Joe Starfighter, everybody.
Yo, Joe!
Now, at the border of Volkuku land, and this is a page 2 where it's the inks aren't, the renderings here aren't I think up to par with some of the rest of the stuff in the book. But we've got Cobra Commander, or rather Destro, leading the troops down the center, and Commander and Zartan kind of flanking on the right and the left. And so we see the beginnings of that plan.
Yo, Joe!
On the asteroid, and like this page is tight. Like this is, so the space stuff for the most part looks pretty good. There's lots of tiny details. When you draw in space, there's so much black involved that you really got to be careful where you spot blacks and where you do it, because it could overdo it and it could take over the page. And I think they do a pretty good job of this, of rendering this stuff out here for the most part. So the Starfighter crashes, and the robots are now attacking that. But they are rescued just in time by the Joes on foot, the Joes and the October Guard on foot. I think that's Duke who says, Duke who says, looks like we have to hitch a ride home in the Russian shuttle.
Yo, Joe!
A couple 2-page spread for some high C X-Men drinks. That's cool. And in Volkuku land, Destro is shocked to see that no one's opening fire on them from the middle at all. And we see what happened with Hawk and his request for logs and drums and barrels. They set them up to look like tanks at the front to fool even Destro. So their cargo containers topped with fuel drums and old telephone poles. He pulled back his main force to flank one of the sides, so that because the main force wasn't big enough to stop all the battle, there's just their main force is doing an ambush on one of the sides, and of course it's the side that Cobra Commander is on. So it worked, and they ambushed Cobra Commander, and it seemingly took out all of his troops. And Duke reminds the general, this is just step 1. There's a whole lot of things that could go wrong, according to Mr. Murphy and his famous law.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, in space, the Defiant is totaled. The Russian shuttle is badly damaged. So the Joes and everyone is stuck. So they might as well make an all-out attack on the asteroid command center, because it's the only way to save the Earth. So it really is very much like Armageddon. Like we got to do this, otherwise everything's going to die. And we're, remember, like one of the shuttles blew up and they couldn't. Bruce Willis had to stick around, and it's a whole thing. So their Joes are and the October Guard. They're going to gear up, and they're all going to make the attack. Now, Payload and I think it's Dragonsky are going to stay behind and try to repair the ship so that they can actually can escape if they need to, using parts of the Defiant. And Duke makes a good point. He says 2 more guys with rifles won't make much of a difference because they're already behind the 8 ball here.
Yo, Joe!
So Cobra Commander is fleeing. The only word missing is retreat, as all of his toys are getting blown up. And he says, I'm going to personally strangle that chrome-faced know-it-all, because he's blaming Destro for this, even though we all saw Destro was genuinely surprised here. So they sent those Cobras packing, and as they're kind of, the Joes did, and as they're kind of regrouping, they do see in the sky, Stalker notices this bright, although it wouldn't be bright though, like he sees this asteroid in the sky. But I guess if it's quasi entering the atmosphere, it might make there might be a flash involved. But they can apparently see the asteroid from where they're sitting, and they know the troop that they're on. So, but they don't want to tell everyone else that this all might be in vain because the world might end.
Yo, Joe!
It'd be a nice thing to tell me yesterday. And so now we're on the edge, the bubble, like kind of the edge of the crater of the control center where all these robots are launching from. And they say, Duke, what's the plan? And he says, it's real simple. We just run down there and shoot everything that moves. So next issue, irresistible forces and immovable objects, action, intrigue, and vehement vituperation. Exciting. This was a pretty action-packed book. I really dug it. Qualms about some of the art levels aside, I really dug it. You got a message, postbox from the pit. From the editor, it says, last issue I hinted how some of Marvel's greatest talents are pooling their efforts to make G.I. Joe 150 the greatest Joe Spectacular of all time. Here's how they're doing it. A gallery of pinups of our hottest heroes and villains. So that's something exciting to look forward to in about 3 issues. So we've got letters here from Carter Caldwell out of Pineville, Kentucky. Andre Eliatambi from Riyadh, Saudi. Wow. Ryan McGrady from West Warwich, Rhode Island. Ted Jacobson out of Rapid City, South Dakota. Joe Calix out of Plainfield, Illinois. William Bonanno, address withheld by request, possibly because he's from the Bonanno crime family. Henrik Eriksson out of Vasterhang, Sweden. That's awesome. Ronald Millsaps Jr. out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Johnny Rice, address withheld by request, possibly because he's also in the Bonanno crime family. Nathan Gillespie out of Iowa City, Iowa. And Sinead Grimes out of Limerick, Ireland. What? I'm an Irish G.I. Joe fanatic, and unfortunately just one of a legion of female fans. Unfortunately, G.I. Joe is hard to get here in Ireland, and I missed quite a few issues. So if any Joe buffs could write and fill me in on what's been happening, I'd really appreciate it. Sláinte and Yo Joe. I know it says Sláinte because I watched a lot of Ray Donovan. So they say Sláinte a lot. And it's got Sinead's address. Maybe we should send her a letter and fill her in on what's been happening in 30 years of G.I. Joe. We've done this before on the show. And now I think I'm going to make me a note to send Sinead a letter. Do that right now. Literally thinking of this. Send Sinead a letter. And we're going to fill her in and we're going to see what happens. Next issue, stuff gets worse for the Joes. All right. Great stuff. I like it. It's a total action. The execution is a little rough, but as far as what happens and stuff and everything that goes on in it, I dig it. I think this stuff's good. I like the break from the Star Brigade stuff. I don't love the Destro Castle stuff, but it's having the whole Destro calling it audible and then play not working, kind of a football thing, I think is a lot of fun. So next issue is G.I. Joe 148, the Legion of the Unliving. It's got a great cover with Roadblock and a giant clamp. There's a lot to enjoy about these issues. I really do. So I hope you're enjoying them as much as I do. And now you, Joe, enjoying is half the battle.